Hi, everyone, and welcome to Ask a Property Manager, episode number 68. Today is April 28th, 2021. We're coming to you from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo, and I'm Andrew Schultz, Principal Broker of Own Buffalo, Inc. On today's show, we're going to be talking about a $15,000 tax credit for first-time homebuyers and why that might not be a great idea. We're going to talk about evicting a family member. We'll answer some questions from housing providers around the country and so much more. Before we jump into all that, we are going to plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager drop every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can find those on our Facebook page as well as on our YouTube page. They are usually live on Facebook and then they go up on YouTube shortly thereafter. Don't forget about our Instagram as well. And last but not least, don't forget about the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. Current episode of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast is taking a look at contacting former landlord references, renters' insurance requirements, and tenants requesting an application refund after they've already been denied. Don't miss out on that. New episodes of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast drop every other Thursday morning, anywhere podcasts are heard or over at rentprep.com/podcast. We're going to jump right into our news articles of the day here. We have two articles, and I'm going to go through both articles before I really put any comments into either one of them here. These are both from Housing. These are both from within the last couple days. I believe they were both on April 26th. Let's go ahead and jump in. Biden's 15K first-time homebuyer tax credit is now a bill. President Joe Biden called for a first-time homebuyer $15,000 tax credit, and Congress has answered his call. United States Representative Earl Blumenauer, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, and Representative Jimmy Panetta today introduced the new legislation dubbed the First-Time Homebuyer Act. The bill would provide a tax credit for first-time homebuyers of up to 10% of the purchase price or a maximum of $15,000. In order to be eligible for the full credit, potential buyers must not have owned or purchased a home within the past 3 years. The program would be targeted to low and middle income earners. Participants must also make no more than 160% of the area median income, and the home's purchase price must be no more than 110% of the area median purchase price. So there are some restrictions. Borrowers could claim the credit for primary residences purchased after December 31, 2020. Borrowers would need to use the home as a primary residence for at least 4 years or face taxes to recover a portion of the credit. Blumenauer, who introduced the legislation, said in a press conference that a $15,000 first-time homebuyer tax credit was a key campaign promise of President Joe Biden. The proposal differs from a different piece of legislation designed to give first-generation homebuyers down payment assistance in the form of a grant at closing. Lawmakers led by Representative Maxine Waters published the down payment assistance bill last week ahead of a committee meeting, but a White House spokesperson said that it is not part of Biden's larger infrastructure bill. I did take a quick look at that down payment assistance bill, and they're talking about up to $25,000 in down payment assistance in that bill. That'll become relevant in a few minutes. In a prepared statement, they hinted that there may be room for both proposals. That's where it becomes relevant. This legislation is just one element of the big, bold housing agenda that we are promoting to combat the housing affordability crisis and address centuries of overtly racist, and discriminatory housing practices that have left massive wealth, homeownership, and opportunity gaps between white communities and communities of color. It is not yet clear whether Blumenauer's bill will be included in the Biden administration's infrastructure package, although Biden has said that housing is infrastructure. Its inclusion in the larger legislative push would greatly increase the chances of it passing. Sunny Shaw, the president of the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, a housing industry trade association, said the legislation would build wealth within communities that face systemic exclusions in the housing market. The refundable tax credit proposed in the bill would increase homeownership among low and moderate income Americans, especially those from marginalized communities with historically low ownership rates, said Shaw. Marcia Fudge, who leads the Department of Housing and Urban Development, has also said that combating racial inequality in housing is a top priority. In an address during the Mortgage Bankers Association virtual spring conference, Fudge drew attention to the homeownership gap. The gulf between black and white homeownership is greater today than it was in 1968, when banks could still legally discriminate against borrowers based on the color of their skin, she said. We actually talked about that MBA spring conference in one of our other episodes as well. The last time a first-time homebuyer tax credit was available, it was widely popular, and Blumenauer said that such a program has proven effective. 1.5 million homeowners took advantage of the first-time homebuyer tax credit that was part of the 2008 Housing and Economic Recovery Act. The 2008 law created a $7,500 tax credit for first-time homebuyers. In 2009, the credit rose to $8,000. That year, an independent IRS watchdog found that 74,000 questionable claims for the credit slipped by the agency. In some instances, borrowers were younger than 18, had owned a home within the past 3 years, or claimed the credit without purchasing a home. So I highlight this article so that I can highlight this article, which is also from HousingWire. Home sale prices reach record highs. Again, published the same day on the same website. Literally, these articles were one in another, right? One right above the other when I was looking for articles to cover on the show. And I want to cover this article, and then we'll get into a little bit of info on both. The effects of low housing inventory continue to cause significant ripples in the housing market. As a recent Redfin report shows, home sale prices across the country have reached an average of $344,625, an all-time high and an 18% increase year over year. I apologize, I've got the hiccups here. That's well above the average home sale price in Redfin's March report, at an all-time high of $331,590, but the prices aren't deterring home buyers. In looking at more than 400 metros, Redfin found that homes sold during a 4-week period ending April 18 were on the market for a median of 21 days, the shortest time on market since 2012. That's also 16 days fewer than the same period in 2020, and 45% of homes sold for more than their list price, another all-time high. At the highest points in 19 and 20, average home sale prices never went above $300,000 and $325,000 respectively. The average sale to list price ratio, which measures how close homes are selling to their asking prices, increased 2.3 percentage points year over year for an all-time high of 101.0. That means that the average home sold for 1% more than its asking price. There are levels to the shortage that go beyond the surface. Despite what is undoubtedly a seller's market, many prospective sellers, candidates that in a different market would be happy to sell, are instead choosing to stay put for fear of being unable to find or afford a new home. That's led to a shortage of mid-price homes on the market and an uptick in available luxury homes. In all, Redfin reported 528,861 active listings in the 4-week period, down 40% year over year. Markets with interesting luxury home numbers include Denver, where high-price homes are staying on the market an average of only 14 days, Phoenix, where luxury homes are selling on average for 25% more than they did in 2020, Warren, Michigan, which has 73.8% more luxury homes on the market than in the first quarter of 2020, and San Francisco, where luxury homes are averaging nearly $4 million, the highest median price of Redfin's study, but they are still flying off the shelves in only 16 days on average. If prospective sellers move and buy another home, they will face a very competitive housing market as buyers, and they don't need to sell to take advantage of record low mortgage rates. They can just refinance their current home, said Daryl Fairweather, Redfin chief economist. Fairweather added that this is becoming increasingly clear that the COVID-19 pandemic isn't the sole reason people aren't selling their homes. There has been an ongoing debate at Redfin about whether the fear of coronavirus infection was keeping homeowners from selling. With a third of American adults now fully vaccinated and still hardly any homes being listed for sale, we're close to settling that debate. On top of that, builders are struggling to construct new homes given the ongoing lumber shortages. Without more homeowners listing, buyers are scrambling to compete for a limited number of homes on the market, which continues to drive prices up to new heights. The ones that are selling are getting their money's worth on the initial listing. Redfin found that the average listing price over the same 4-week period skyrocketed to $356,000, a 19% increase year over year. The highest average listing price in 2020 was in October at $326,000. Average listing prices never approached $325,000 in 2019. So, again, these two articles were literally published on the same day. They were published, I believe, within a few minutes of each other. Let me take a look here. Okay, within an hour of each other, and they were stacked on top of each other, Article 1 and Article 2, when I was looking for articles to research. When you have a situation like what we currently have in the real estate market, and my understanding is that this is a nationwide issue, like all of the articles that I'm reading, this is not just an isolated Buffalo or Western New York region issue, not even just a New York State issue. This is a nationwide issue where we have essentially a massive housing shortage. throwing an extra 15,000 or possibly 25,000 if they go with the other proposal, or possibly if they have some sort of a merger of the two, you could be looking at 15 plus 25,000 in some sort of assistance to first-time home buyers, is just throwing more fuel on the fire in the sales process, in my opinion. I don't think that when you have one of the hottest markets on record with one of the lowest amounts of inventory on record, I don't think that that's the best time to throw a whole nother group of people into the housing market who are now going to be competing for what's already a very, very limited amount of inventory. And I understand that what we're talking about is going to be homes that we're not talking about $350,000 homes in the Buffalo region for the most part. Like not in most of the places where we're talking about first-time home buyers, which is what we're targeting with this first-time home buyer tax credit. Like the numbers don't add up there. Like you're not going to be buying a $300,000 to $350,000 home and still being able to qualify for this home buyer tax credit, at least here in Western New York. Other areas that may very well be the case. But given what they're talking about here, I just don't see a justification for adding a whole nother group of people into the market. And you could say that it's just going to strengthen the people that are already in the market. And my response to that would be, I think that you're going to see the property values jump by another 15, 20, 25 grand if this was to pass. And the reason I say that is because when there's more money available in the market, obviously the cost of things is going to go up. So I have a feeling that even if you were to add this $15,000 first-time homebuyer tax credit into this entire mess of a real estate market, I don't think it's going to have the desired effect. I think it's going to cause the cost of housing to increase even further and make it even more unapproachable for that first-time home buyer, because now everybody's going to be trying to get even more, knowing that you're getting an extra $15,000 or whatever the case may be. I don't think this is a great plan. The last time we had a first-time home buyer credit was in 2008 and 2009. The housing crash. That was a time when it made sense to have a housing credit. It put people back into the market, back into the mood to buy homes in a time when many people were uncertain as to whether that was the right move or not. That's a good time to offer a housing credit. Right now, when you have the hottest market in the country, I don't think that this is a wise idea. I think that this is just going to create more chaos in an already chaotic market. And I don't think that this is going to help the people that it's intended to help. At least that's my opinion. Your mileage may vary. Comment down below. Let me know what your thoughts are. But at least from where I'm sitting, it just doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense right now. Like I said, I could be completely wrong. I could be completely off base. Let me know what your thoughts are on it down in the comments. Let's look at something a little bit more humorous than these articles. If you've bought an appliance in the last few years, you certainly feel what I've got posted up here. We had a beer fridge in our garage back when I was living with a buddy of mine. We had a beer fridge in our garage that was probably 25 years old and still running like a champ. And I can't tell you the number of times that we've replaced refrigerators 2 years. It seems like with refrigerators, they either last for 2 years or they last for a century. We've definitely run into that quite a bit. So I saw that. I thought that was pretty funny. Decided I would share that with everybody. And then obviously this one, hey, this leads right back to our articles that we were just talking about with this crazy market. You know, buyers are willing to go to some pretty far extremes to make sure that they get the housing deal that they want, which is crazy when you think about it. So let's go ahead and jump into our questions from housing providers around the country. We're going to start with this one on issuing a non-renewal notice. How much do you share when you give a notice of non-renewal on a lease? Last fall, I put a very young couple into one of my single-family homes. I set the lease to expire in March with plans to rewrite a 12-month lease. They haven't missed a rent payment or complained the entire time they've been there. Since they've been there, they've broken the window out of the front door, busted the back storm door, and had garbage and trash all over the lawn. Last week, someone came by with a gun to threaten the woman and throw a brick through her car window. Now I'm going to issue a 30-day notice of non-renewal. When I do this, I'm sure they will ask why. What kind of information would you give and details on the conditions, or is there a generic statement that you would use? So in a situation like this, the first thing you're going to need to do is check your state laws to see what you're required to disclose, as well as how long the notice is that you're required to give. So here at the state of New York, if you're giving a lease termination notice, it's done on a graduated scale. So if the tenants have lived there for under 1 year, which I believe they have based on this post, it would be a 30-day. If they've been there for 1 to 2 years, it's a 60-day, and if they've been there for 2+ years, it's a 90-day termination notice. That's here in the state of New York, so definitely check to see what the laws are in, I believe, Texas is where you said this was? Maybe there's no state listed on this one. It doesn't look like there's a state listed. So check the laws in your state and see what it is that you're required to offer in terms of a non-renewal notice. The next thing that I will mention is that my stance on terminating leases, denying applications, anything where you're putting something in writing and communicating it to a tenant is to say the bare minimum that you have to. To reference the Miranda rights, for instance, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. That certainly applies here. The more you say, the more ammo you're giving somebody to try to argue why you should rescind the notice or argue that what you're doing is retaliatory or whatever the case may be. You know, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen and speak in a 2-to-1 ratio, and you'll probably find that things go a little bit smoother. My thought on this, though, is disclose the absolute bare minimum that you have to. If you can just terminate and you don't have to give a reason, that would probably be the best way to handle it. If you do have to find a reason, then that's something that you're going to want to come up with on your end. Maybe talk to your attorney, see what their recommendation would be. But that would be my recommendation, would be disclose the bare minimum that you have to and just do what you have to do to get through the situation to get control of the property back. Hopefully that you've also gone ahead and issued lease violations for the damages and let the tenants know that they're going to be responsible for replacing that storm door and the window and things like that. Hopefully they've either been charged or are planning on paying for that stuff, because that's definitely going to be probably well above and beyond the security deposit by the sounds of things. So good luck. Hopefully you are in a position where this works out for you. And like I said, disclose the bare minimum that you absolutely have to. On to the next one, hiding pets on a rental application. Even after seeing clearly in the ad, no pets, you notice on the application that they left a spot blank where that says, do you have pets? And then before you proceed with a credit check, etc., you ask again if they have any pets, and they say, yes, we have a small cat, but if you're not willing to take a deposit, we can find a place for her. Do you trust that they will do that? Do you add any penalties to the lease? Do you just evict or whatever? So this actually breaks 2 of our application rules, the no blank spaces rule, as well as the falsifying information rule. And I guess this would technically be falsification by omission, since they just didn't tell you at all. But either way, they do have a pet, and they did admit to having the pet. At least you found out on the front end before they moved in. That's probably the best case scenario for you. Based on what you've already said here, I would deny the application based on not meeting our criteria of no pets. I'm always super skeptical of anybody that says that they're willing to give up a pet, which they hopefully love, just to get into an apartment. It always makes me wonder when somebody says that they're willing to give up their pet just to get into an apartment. Like, what exactly is going on behind the scenes that you're willing to give up an animal that you have loved for years in some instances just to get into new housing? And sometimes you have to, and I understand that. But it always gives me pause whenever something like that pops up on our radar. And it happens a lot more frequently than you would think. I also think the chances of these people trying to sneak the animal into the apartment at some point just to visit or whatever the case may be are incredibly high. You already know that they have the animal. You already know that this is going to be an issue as part of their tenancy. At this point, having a pet is not a protected class unless it's an emotional support animal or a service animal. That's another topic for another day. But if this is strictly just a pet, my recommendation would be deny the application. They've already proven to you that they they've already proven to you that they don't have plans to be completely truthful with the entire tenancy. I would probably just move on. I will take a quick minute here and show you our pet clause, our no pet clause in our lease, so that you can get an idea of how we handle the situation. No pet shall be brought onto the premises, even temporarily, without the express written permission of the landlord. If a pet has been in the premises at any time during the tenant's occupancy, with or without consent, a charge may be made for defleeing, deodorizing, and or shampooing, and or damages occasioned by the pet. Any animals on the property not registered under the rental agreement will be presumed to be strays and will be disposed of according to law at the option of the landlord. So that's just the language that's in our lease if we're renting something with no pets. We very seldom ever do a rental that allows for pets. We do have an animal agreement for when we have emotional supports and service animals and things of that nature, but that's how we would go about handling that situation. We're pretty much no pets across the board currently. It just seems like every time we've tried that route, it comes back to bite us in the form of pet damages and things of that nature. So we tend to steer away from it like a lot of the other housing providers in the area. And our last question for the day, evicting a family member. This one's pretty interesting, actually. My friend's mother passed a few years ago in Texas, and she was left with an acre of property with a mobile home on it. She never formally rented out, but cousins ended up moving in and were supposed to pay rent, but never have. They are basically squatters. She now wants to sell the property. What advice can be given on the best way to get the cousins to move out? And if they won't move out, will she have to go through an eviction, or can she just go take possession of the property? Since it is family in there, she wants to keep it amicable. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, this is not going to be an amicable situation. I can almost guarantee it. You're dealing with a situation where somebody's been living somewhere for free for some period of time, and now they're being told, you got to go. It's not going to be amicable. There's no amicable way about this. The laws in Texas are vastly different than the laws in New York State, so I'm not even going to try to quote whatever the laws in Texas may be. And actually, it's interesting because this ties back to our conversation in last week's episode, episode 67, talking about purchasing a foreclosure where there's an occupant in it. I believe, if I remember correctly, that foreclosure that they were talking about, the occupant was the previous homeowner. And I had explained that, at least in the state of New York, that would likely wind up as an eviction scenario. Your first stop here needs to be a landlord-tenant attorney that understands what the restrictions are in that area right now. Here in New York, this would wind up as an eviction more than likely. Evictions aren't happening for the most part in New York State right now. With the moratoriums being extended over and over, it may be quite a while before you even get an opportunity where you could evict. Some other options that you could consider here, if the mobile home is debt-free, if the property is debt-free, you might be able to sell it to the cousins on some kind of an owner hold or something like that, assuming they have money to actually complete such a transaction. If they're not paying the rent, I don't know what their financial situation is, but that might be one option. Or you may have another option available to you in the form of a cash for keys agreement just to get them out the door. It's nobody's favorite, but if it gets control of the asset and gets you into a position where you can sell the property and reap the benefits of the sale, it's probably going to be worth it to offer that cash for keys scenario just to get the tenant out of the property, get them out the door, and get control of the asset back. This is actually becoming a huge issue with landlords and housing providers who want to sell their properties, but they have non-paying tenants that won't leave. Nobody wants to buy somebody else's headache, is really what it boils down to at the end of the day. So I think if you were to try to sell this property with the occupants still inside of it, you would probably not have a very good time. You're not going to get a lot of interest. Again, it might be very different down in Texas. I don't know what the restrictions are there or what the laws are in that part of the country right now. But here in New York State, this would probably turn into a long, drawn-out battle and not necessarily something that most people who are trying to buy a home are going to want to deal with. So you're probably going to wind up having to deal with this on the front end before you list the home for sale. You've got a couple of options available to you. Hopefully one of those pans out, and best of luck to you. That pretty much wraps things up for us here this week on Ask a Property Manager. Thank you all so much for watching. We love producing Ask a Property Manager, and you could help us to improve by dropping a question in the comments either on Facebook or YouTube, and your question may be answered in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content, or if we brought some value to you today, do us a favor and hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, subscribe, and share helps us to grow and reach more people. We'll be back next week on May 5th, that's next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern, with another show you won't want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.